The restaurant shimmered under soft amber light, candles flickering on every table like tiny stars brought down to earth. Champagne glasses caught the glow refracting gold across white tablecloths. A banner stretched across the back wall with my name printed in elegant script, surrounded by delicate flowers. It should have been the happiest night of my life, my engagement dinner, the moment when everything I'd worked for finally felt recognized. But as I stood to make a toast, my hand trembling slightly around the microphone, laughter erupted from the far end of the room. My mother and sister were huddled over a phone, showing old photos not of me but of my sister's wedding from 3 years ago. My fiancé Marcus tried to smile through it, squeezing my hand gently, but I felt it then, sharp and familiar, the sting of being background noise at my own celebration. They thought I'd laugh it off. They thought I'd stay quiet like always. They had no idea silence can turn into power once it hardens enough. Growing up, silence was my inheritance, passed down like second-hand clothes that never quite fit. In our house, noise meant importance, and importance never belonged to me. My father was the storyteller, filling every dinner with tales from his career. My mother was the organizer, orchestrating every event with military precision. My sister Vanessa, she was the adored one, the golden child whose tears could stop time itself. And me. I was the filler between their lives, the one who made things run smoothly without ever being noticed. When I brought home academic awards in middle school, my mother smiled distractedly, already planning Vanessa's birthday party. When my sister cried over a bad grade, she dropped everything. I learned early that attention wasn't earned through achievement. It was distributed by some invisible formula I'd never understand. By the time I got to college, I had stopped asking to be seen. Every phone call home was about someone else's promotion, someone else's milestone, someone else's heartbreak that needed immediate attention. When I graduated with honors, the conversation lasted 4 minutes before shifting to Vanessa's new apartment hunt. When I got my first real job, my father congratulated me briefly, then asked if I could help my sister with her resume. I told myself it didn't matter, that independence meant not needing validation. But somewhere deep down, a different truth was forming. When Marcus proposed to me on a quiet beach at sunset, ring glinting in the fading light, I called home with genuine excitement for the first time in years. My mother answered and I could barely get the words out. "Mom, I'm engaged." There was a pause, then a distracted, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Let me call you back." Vanessa just walked in. She never called back. That should have been my first warning. But I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be different. I planned everything myself, the dinner, the seating arrangements, the invitations with their cream-colored envelopes. I picked a quiet restaurant downtown with exposed brick walls and enough space for laughter to feel shared rather than stolen. I even reserved a small table near the window, thinking my family would appreciate the view of the city lights. Marcus offered to help, but I wanted this to be perfect, wanted to prove I could create something beautiful that they couldn't ignore. The night arrived cool and clear, autumn settling over the city like a gentle exhale. I wore a navy dress my sister once said made me look sophisticated. I arrived early, checking every detail, adjusting flowers, confirming the champagne was chilled. Marcus stood beside me, handsome in his grey suit, squeezing my shoulder. "They're going to love this," he whispered. I wanted to believe him, I really did. They arrived 40 minutes late without apology or explanation. My sister wore a white dress, flowing and elegant, the kind you'd wear to your own event. My mother came in complaining about traffic, her voice cutting through the soft music. My father checked his watch twice before even greeting me. Marcus welcomed them warmly, ever the diplomat, offering drinks and guiding them to their seats. I smiled, played the gracious host, ignored the tightness building in my chest. When Marcus lifted his glass later and said, "To family, the people who shape who we are," my mother leaned over to whisper something to Vanessa. They laughed softly during his toast, their heads bent together conspiratorially. Several guests glanced over, confused. Marcus faltered mid-sentence, then recovered. I smiled wider, but inside something cracked. It wasn't rage, not yet, it was recognition, clear and cold as winter water. This wasn't new behavior. It was just the last straw I'd carry. Dinner continued in a blur of forced smiles and hollow conversation. My mother spent most of the meal on her phone, texting someone more important. Vanessa kept redirecting conversations back to her recent promotion, her upcoming vacation, her new boyfriend. My father ate quietly, offering occasional nods but no real presence. When the servers brought out the cake I'd specially ordered, vanilla with raspberry filling because Marcus loved it, Vanessa wrinkled her nose. "I thought you knew I don't like raspberry," she said. It wasn't even her cake, it wasn't her night. But somehow her preference still mattered more than the celebration itself. Marcus reached for my hand under the table, his grip tight with silent support. I squeezed back, grateful for his steadiness even as my own foundation crumbled. When we finally said goodbye hours later, my mother kissed my cheek absently. "Lovely evening, dear. We should do this again sometime." As if it were just another casual dinner, as if my engagement meant nothing. That night, after the dinner ended and guests departed with kind words I barely heard, I stayed behind while staff cleared tables. The candles had burned low, leaving waxy puddles in their holders. The room smelled of roses and burnt sugar, sweet and melancholic. Marcus had gone to get the car, leaving me alone in the dimming space. I sat at our table, still set with empty champagne glasses, symbols of a celebration I'd never really been part of. My phone buzzed with messages from friends saying how beautiful everything was, how happy they were for us. But all I could see was my mother's distracted face, my sister's white dress, my father's watch. And then with trembling fingers I opened my phone, opened my notes app and wrote 5 words that would change everything. Rewrite. Name, records, location. Life. That was the start. Not of revenge, but of reclamation, not of anger, but of action. That was the moment silence became something I chose, rather than something imposed on me. In the weeks that followed, I stopped explaining myself to anyone who wouldn't truly listen. I cancelled the wedding venue quietly, citing personal reasons to the coordinator who thankfully didn't pry. The deposit was non-refundable, but freedom rarely comes without cost. I closed the shared bank account my mother had insisted I open years ago for family emergencies that somehow only benefited Vanessa. I moved my savings to a new account, opened under a name that felt like a promise rather than a burden, Lena Rhodes. Each task felt deliberate, each form filled out, each signature written, each confirmation email received like a declaration written in calm ink. I filed legal paperwork for the name change, citing personal preference. The clerk barely looked up, stamping documents with bureaucratic efficiency. I changed my phone number, keeping only Marcus and 3 close friends in the loop. I requested a transfer through work, applying for a position in our Portland office. My manager approved it within days, mentioning they'd been hoping someone would volunteer. Marcus noticed the changes, of course. He'd find me at the kitchen table late at night, surrounded by paperwork and highlighters mapping out logistics. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one evening, his voice gentle but concerned. We'd been together 3 years, engaged for 2 months, and suddenly I was dismantling everything. "I've never been more sure of anything," I told him honestly. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not running away, I'm running toward myself." He sat beside me, studied my face in the laptop's blue glow. "Then I'm coming with you," he said simply. "Portland sounds good, fresh start for both of us." I looked at him, this man who'd stood beside me through everything, who'd witnessed my family's dismissal firsthand and never once suggested I was overreacting. "You'd really leave everything here, for you, without hesitation." That night I cried for the first time since the engagement dinner, not from sadness but from relief. The messages from my family came gradually, then all at once. First, my mother texted asking why I hadn't responded to her dinner invitation. Then Vanessa called, annoyed that I'd missed her birthday brunch. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted. "Why are you acting like this? You're overreacting to nothing. You're being dramatic, just like always." Each message was a tiny echo of every dismissal I'd ever received, every time my feelings were minimized, every moment I was told my perspective didn't matter. They sounded exactly like the people they'd always been, people who expected silence to mean compliance, who mistook my quietness for agreement. When I finally blocked their numbers, Marcus was sitting beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to be." The calls turned to emails. My father wrote long paragraphs about family obligation, about respect, about how I was breaking my mother's heart. But nowhere in his message did he acknowledge breaking mine first. 3 months later, I was living in Portland, Marcus beside me in our new apartment that smelled of fresh paint and constant rain. The walls were bare, waiting for us to decide who we wanted to be in this space. The kitchen was small but filled with morning light. The bedroom overlooked a park where joggers passed like clockwork. We built a new rhythm together, mornings with coffee by the window, watching the city wake up. Evenings with notebooks full of plans, dreaming about the life we were creating from scratch. Marcus got a job at a local firm, I settled into my new position, and slowly, carefully we built something that didn't need approval from anyone but us. The quiet here was different. It didn't feel like neglect or invisibility. It felt like peace, the kind that comes from being seen by the person who matters most. My co-workers knew me as Lena, a fresh face with no complicated history. I liked the clean slate. I liked choosing who I was becoming. Then one morning, 4 months after we'd left, an email arrived in my work inbox. Subject line, forwarded message, engagement inquiry. My old HR manager from my previous office had received a call. Someone claiming to be your mother is asking about your employment records and current location, the message said. The system automatically flagged it as unverified relationship since your emergency contact information lists no family members. I wanted to give you a heads up before taking any further action. Please advise how you'd like me to proceed. I stared at the words until they blurred, my coffee going cold in my hands. There it was, proof that the distance was no longer just emotional, it was official, documented, systematically recognized. My mother had actually called my old workplace trying to find me. The thought was both violating and strangely validating. I replied simply, please do not release any information. Thank you for respecting my privacy. Then I closed my laptop and sat very still. Marcus found me like that an hour later, still sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. What happened? He asked, concern creasing his forehead. I showed him the email without speaking. He read it twice, then sat across from me. Do you want to respond to them? I shook my head. There's nothing to say that they'd actually hear. They might surprise you, he offered gently. They've had months to surprise me, I replied. They chose persistence over reflection. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm here. That night I drafted a single email to my father's address, the only one I hadn't blocked. It was short, just 3 paragraphs. I explained that I'd changed my name, that I'd moved, that I needed space to figure out who I was without their expectations weighing me down. I didn't mention the engagement dinner specifically. I didn't list grievances or demand apologies. I simply stated my boundary and asked them to respect it. I never sent that email. Instead, I saved it in my drafts folder where it sat like a ghost of a conversation we'd never have. Because the truth was, they didn't deserve my explanations. They'd had 30 years to see me, to ask questions, to wonder what I needed. Their sudden interest now felt less like concern and more like control, a panic at losing access rather than losing connection. Weeks passed. Marcus and I fell deeper into our Portland life. We found a favorite coffee shop, made friends with neighbors, adopted a cat we named Silver for her grey coat and quiet disposition. I got promoted at work, leading a project that challenged and excited me. Marcus started taking photography classes, filling our apartment with prints of the city and rain. We were building something real, something ours. And slowly the weight I'd carried my whole life began to lift. Not all at once, but in small increments, like snow melting under spring sun. I started sleeping better, smiling came easier. I laughed without checking first if it was appropriate. 6 months after leaving, on a grey Saturday morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, silence, then my grandmother's voice, shaky with age. Is this really you? My grandmother, my father's mother, the only person in my family who'd ever seen me without comparison. Grandma, how did you get this number? Your father gave it to me, said you changed it, but he'd managed to get it somehow. I felt a flash of anger that he'd violated my privacy, but it dissolved at the sound of her voice. I'm not calling to convince you to come back, she continued. I'm calling to say I understand why you left, and I'm proud of you. Those words hit me like warm rain. You are, always have been, sweetheart. You were the brave one. You just needed time to figure that out. We talked for an hour, her telling me about her garden, me describing Portland's constant drizzle. Before hanging up, she said something I'd remember forever. Your grandfather and I, we had to leave our families too back in the old country, she said quietly. Sometimes love means distance. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people figure out their mistakes without you there to cushion the fall. Do you think they'll figure it out? I asked. She laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes. Maybe, maybe not, but that's not your responsibility anymore. After we hung up, I sat with those words, that's not your responsibility anymore. Permission I didn't know I'd been waiting for. That evening, Marcus found me crying in the kitchen, but this time with relief rather than grief. Good news or bad? He asked carefully. Good, I managed. Really, really good. He held me while I explained, while I let myself feel the full weight of being seen, truly seen, by someone who'd known me since childhood. My grandmother had given me something my parents never could, validation without conditions. 2 weeks later, a package arrived. Inside was my grandmother's jade bracelet, the one she'd worn every day of my childhood, along with a note. The note was written in her shaky cursive. This was given to me when I left home. Now it's yours. Wear it when you need to remember that leaving doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it means you finally found your way. I put the bracelet on immediately, the cool jade settling against my wrist like a blessing. Marcus watched from the doorway. Beautiful, he said. She is, I agreed. That winter, we got married quietly, just the two of us and 2 witnesses we'd met at a local bookstore. It was nothing like the wedding I'd once imagined. No big reception, no family drama, no champagne towers or dancing. Just Marcus and me in a small courthouse, promising forever in front of a kind judge who congratulated us warmly. Afterward, we walked through the rain to our favourite coffee shop and ordered pie. My phone buzzed with a message from my grandmother. "I know what day it is. Be happy, sweetheart, you've earned it." She'd somehow known without being told. Maybe my father had mentioned the original date we'd planned. Maybe she just sensed it. Either way, her message was the only acknowledgement we needed. That night, Marcus and I lay in bed, rain drumming against the windows, silver purring between us. "Any regrets?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. "No, this feels right, like we started our marriage as ourselves, not as extensions of other people's expectations." He kissed my forehead. "Good, because I wouldn't change a single thing." We spent our first year of marriage building a life that looked nothing like what I'd imagined growing up. No big house in the suburbs like my parents had, no keeping up with anyone's standards but our own. We travelled when we could afford it, stayed home when we couldn't. We hosted small dinners for friends who actually listened when we spoke. We adopted another cat, then fostered a dog who eventually became permanent. We created holidays based on what brought us joy rather than obligation. And slowly, I stopped waiting for my family to understand. Understanding wasn't required for healing. Distance was enough. Then 1.5 years after I'd left, my grandmother passed away quietly in her sleep. My father called from the unknown number, his voice hollow. "Mom's gone. Funeral is Saturday. I know you probably won't come, but I thought you should know." I stood in our kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, feeling the complicated tangle of grief and dread. "I'll be there," I said quietly. For her," he repeated. "Not for us. No, not for you." The line went dead. Marcus took the week off work, and we flew back to my hometown, a place that felt both familiar and foreign. We stayed in a hotel rather than with family, maintaining the boundary I'd worked so hard to establish. The funeral was small, held in the same chapel where my grandmother had celebrated every holiday for 40 years. When I entered, my mother froze mid-conversation with an aunt I barely remembered. She stared at me like I was a ghost, her face cycling through shock, confusion, and something that might have been shame. "You changed your name," she said, not as a question but as an accusation, her voice carrying across the quiet chapel. Several heads turned. I felt Marcus tense beside me, protective. "Yes," I said simply, my voice steady in a way it never had been around her. "I did." Vanessa appeared from somewhere, older looking than I remembered, her expression guarded. "You just disappeared," she said, like we meant nothing. "I left," I corrected. "There's a difference." My father approached slowly, looking smaller, somehow diminished by grief. For a moment none of us spoke, then my mother's face crumpled. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, tears starting. The apology I'd once desperately wanted now felt insufficient, too little and much too late. "You didn't mean to notice me," I replied quietly. That was always the problem. The words hung in the air, undeniable. Around us, relatives pretended not to listen while absolutely listening. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, tears streaming down her face. Vanessa looked away, uncomfortable with conflict she couldn't charm her way out of. My father finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Your grandmother talked about you constantly this past year. She was so proud of you." "She told me," I said. "We talked every week." His eyes widened. "You did. She called me 6 months ago. We stayed in touch." I watched the realization hit him that his mother had maintained a relationship with me while he'd lost one, that she'd chosen connection over control. "She never said," he murmured. "I asked her not to." I needed space that was just mine. The service began before anyone could respond, giving us all an excuse to stop talking. I sat in the back with Marcus, letting grief wash over me for the woman who'd seen me when no one else bothered to look. During the eulogy, my father mentioned her strength, her independence, her willingness to make hard choices. I wondered if he recognized the parallel to my own life. Probably not. Some people never make those connections. After the service, as people gathered for the reception, I stayed behind in the chapel. My mother approached alone, her heels clicking on the tile floor. For a moment she just stood there, clutching a tissue. "I'm sorry," she finally said, "for everything, for not seeing you, for not making you feel important." I looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman who'd spent so much energy managing appearances that she'd forgotten to nurture substance. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but sorry doesn't rebuild what was never properly built." "Can we try?" she asked. "We start over?" I considered it, the possibility of reconciliation, of slowly bridging the distance I'd created. "Maybe," I said honestly, "but it would have to be different this time. Real conversations, actual interest in my life, boundaries respected." She nodded quickly. "Yes, anything. I'm married now," I told her. His name is Marcus, we live in Portland, I work in project management, I have 2 cats and a dog, these are basic facts you don't know because you never asked. Her face fell. You got married, 18 months ago, the weight of that missed milestone hung between us. I would have come, she whispered, if you'd invited me. Would you, I asked, would you have made it about me or would Vanessa have worn white again? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good, some truths needed to sting. Vanessa appeared in the doorway hesitant. Can I talk to you? She asked quietly. Marcus, sensing the shift, squeezed my hand and stepped away to give us space. My sister and I stood facing each other, years of imbalance between us. I didn't realize, she started. Didn't realize what? That I took up all the air in the room, that you were suffocating. I waited, letting her continue. Mom and Dad, they always made such a big deal about me needing help, needing support, and I just accepted it. I didn't think about what that meant for you. It meant I learned to need nothing from any of you, I said. It meant I became invisible in my own family. I'm sorry, she said, and unlike my mother's apology, this one sounded like it came from actual understanding rather than panic. We talked for 20 minutes in that chapel, the most honest conversation we'd ever had. She told me about feeling pressure to be perfect, to live up to the golden child image. I told her about the loneliness of being overlooked. Neither of us solved anything, but we acknowledged the damage. It was a start, maybe. Before I left the reception, my father pulled me aside. Your grandmother left you something, he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a deed to a small cabin she'd owned in the mountains, a place I'd visited every summer as a child. She wanted you to have it, he said you'd understand why. I did. It was her final gift, a place to retreat, to find peace, to remember that I came from somewhere even if I'd had to leave. That evening, Marcus and I drove to the cabin, an hour into the mountains. It was smaller than I remembered, but perfect. We spent the night there, wrapped in old quilts, talking about whether reconciliation was possible or even desirable. Now 2 years after that engagement dinner when I sign my name, Lena Rhodes, I do it slowly, deliberately. Each letter feels like a small boundary drawn in ink, a declaration of selfhood that no one can erase. I don't wait to be included in other people's stories anymore. I'm writing my own, one careful chapter at a time. My family and I talk occasionally now, awkward phone calls where we're all trying to figure out who we are to each other. My mother sends cards on holidays. Vanessa texts sometimes, sharing small pieces of her life. My father remains mostly quiet, but he shows up when I ask. They're trying in their limited way. I'm allowing it in mine. Marcus and I visit the mountain cabin every few months, bringing friends, hosting small gatherings, filling it with better memories. We're talking about kids someday, about building a family that operates differently than the one I left. They thought I'd stay silent, that I'd accept the role they'd written for me. But silence became the language I used to rewrite everything. I didn't leave to punish them. I left because they'd built a home that had no room for me, so I built one that did. And this time, when the world goes quiet, it's not because I'm invisible. It's because I'm finally at peace.